Professor Park Daho's scaled hands trembled slightly as he brushed away the ancient dust from the metallic surface. The afternoon sun beat down on the dig site, making his protective suit uncomfortably warm. Even after 30 years of archaeological work across 17 star systems, something about this particular site made his heart race with excitement. The scanner in his right hand hummed steadily, its blue light sweeping across the exposed metal surface. Behind him, Dr. Kim He-rin adjusted her own scanning equipment. All four of her eyes focused intently on the readings. The rest of the research team worked in respectful silence, knowing they were witnessing something extraordinary. "Professor, you need to see this," He-rin called out, her voice carrying a note of disbelief. She held up her scanner, its display showing energy readings that seemed to defy the laws of physics. "These patterns, they're unlike anything in our database." Daho moved closer, his tail swishing thoughtfully as he studied the readings. The energy signatures pulsed with a rhythm that suggested dormant but incredibly advanced technology. His outer membrane flickered with blue spots of excitement, a reaction he hadn't experienced since his first major discovery as a young researcher. The excavation sites spread out around them like a giant wound in the planet's surface. What had started as a routine survey had quickly turned into the most significant archaeological find in recent history. The ruins stretched for kilometers in every direction, with most of the structure buried deep underground. Lee Jinwoo, their junior researcher, worked nearby, his tentacles carefully manipulating the delicate cleaning tools around what appeared to be an entrance panel. His younger age showed in the way his skin rippled with barely contained excitement. "Professor Park, Dr. Kim," Jinwoo called out suddenly, his voice echoing across the dig site. "I found something. You need to see this immediately." Daho and He-rin hurried over, their feet kicking up small clouds of dust. Jinwoo's tentacles pointed tremblingly at a series of markings on the newly cleaned section of wall. The symbols were crisp and clear, as if they had been carved yesterday rather than millennia ago. "That's impossible," He-rin whispered, her four eyes widening in shock. "Those are human letters, but that can't be right." Daho pulled out his personal scanner and ran it over the markings several times, checking and double-checking the results. The dating analysis was clear. These ruins were at least 50,000 years old, possibly much older. 3 centuries, he muttered, more to himself than his colleagues. Humans have only been in space for 3 centuries. How could their writing be here? The team's archaeolinguist, Dr. Song Mi-rae, joined them, her crystalline form catching the sunlight as she moved. She studied the markings intently, her translation matrix working overtime. "It's definitely human script," Mi-rae confirmed. "And it's not just random markings. This is a functional interface panel. Look at how the symbols are arranged. It's a control system of some kind." The discovery sparked a flurry of activity across the site. More team members gathered around, each bringing different scanning equipment. The energy readings continued to spike, suggesting that somewhere deep within the structure, ancient systems were still operational. When they finally managed to clear enough debris to access what appeared to be a main entrance, the team gathered their equipment for the first descent. The opening led to a corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly into darkness, its walls lined with the same strange metal they'd found on the surface. As they moved deeper underground, their lights revealed more and more evidence of advanced technology. The walls themselves seemed to respond to their presence, subtle lights flickering to life as they passed. The air grew cooler, and their instruments detected active environmental systems that had somehow maintained their function for millennia. "Look at the preservation," He-rin remarked, running her scanner along a perfectly maintained wall panel. "No decay, no degradation. The engineering principles at work here, they're beyond anything in modern science." Daho stopped suddenly, his scaled skin flushing with excitement as his light beam caught something ahead. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness above them. As their lights played across the room, they revealed rows upon rows of mysterious devices, all connected to a central platform. By the first stars, Jinwoo gasped, his tentacles curling in amazement. This looks like some kind of control center. The team spread out through the chamber, their professional discipline temporarily forgotten in their excitement. Each new discovery brought more questions than answers. How had humans achieved this level of technology so long ago? Why was there no record of this civilization in any historical database? And most importantly, what had happened to make them abandon it all? As Daeho approached the central platform, his scanner began to emit a high-pitched whine. Before he could react, the entire chamber suddenly hummed to life, holographic displays flickering into existence all around them. The team froze in place, watching in awe as ancient systems awakened from their long slumber. "Professor," Herin called out, her voice shaking. "According to these readings, this facility is still fully operational. After 50,000 years, it's still working perfectly." Daeho stood in the center of the chamber, his scientific mind struggling to process the implications of what they'd found. This discovery would rewrite not just human history, but the history of all known spacefaring civilizations. Whatever they had stumbled upon, it was clear that everything they thought they knew about humanity's past was about to change. The team worked quickly to establish their base camp in one of the vast chambers they had discovered. The ancient room, despite its age, provided better shelter than any modern facility they could have constructed. Dr. Choi Yun-suk had spent 3 days straight setting up their equipment, her scaled fingers moving deftly across multiple interfaces as she tried to connect their technology with the ancient systems. The chamber walls pulsed with a faint blue light, covered in displays that seemed to be in some kind of standby mode. Yun-suk's 4 arms worked simultaneously, each manipulating different tools as she attempted to decode the facility's operational protocols. The rest of the team busied themselves with setting up sleeping quarters and research stations, though they all kept glancing at her work with barely concealed anticipation. Professor Park Daeho had just finished organizing their initial findings when Yun-suk's excited voice echoed through the chamber. "Professor Park, I'd done it. I've managed to activate one of the terminals." The entire team dropped what they were doing and rushed over. The holographic display flickered and then burst into brilliant life, filling the air with 3-dimensional star charts that rotated and shifted in response to Yun-suk's movements. The detail was incredible. They could see stellar formations that their most advanced telescopes had barely managed to detect. "The resolution is impossible," Dr. Kim Herin muttered, her 4 eyes widening as she studied the display. "Our best systems can't even come close to this level of detail. And look at the scale. This single map covers nearly a quarter of the known galaxy." Yun-suk's fingers danced across the interface, bringing up more data. Navigation routes appeared as glowing lines connecting thousands of stars. Each route showed travel times that seemed to defy the laws of physics as they knew them. According to these readings, Yun-suk said, her voice trembling with excitement, these weren't just exploration routes. They were regular travel paths, like modern shipping lanes between colonies. But the distances, they were crossing thousands of light years in days. The team watched in stunned silence as more information filled the air around them. Then Herin noticed something in the corner of the display, a timestamp. Her gasp drew everyone's attention. "That can't be right," she whispered, her skin paling to a lighter shade of green. According to this data, human civilization didn't just reach the stars, they ruled them. These maps show human settlements and outposts across millions of star systems. Professor Park moved closer to the display, his tail twitching with nervous energy. "Look at these construction dates," he said, pointing to various markers. "Some of these installations were built over 50,000 years ago. The scale of this civilization, it's beyond anything we've ever encountered." Lee Jinwoo, who had been quietly analyzing the data, suddenly spoke up. "Professor, these aren't just navigation charts. They're showing energy distribution networks, manufacturing centers, research facilities. This was an entire galactic infrastructure." The implications were staggering. Modern humans were considered newcomers to galactic society, having achieved faster-than-light travel barely 3 centuries ago. Yet here was evidence that their ancestors had built and maintained a civilization that spanned a significant portion of the galaxy. Dr. Som Mirai, her crystalline form reflecting the holographic lights, began cross-referencing the data with known historical records. "There's no mention of any of this in any historical database," she reported. "It's as if this entire civilization just vanished." As the team continued to study the displays, more terminals began activating around the chamber. Each new screen brought forth more incredible revelations. They found records of technological achievements that seemed more like fantasy than science. Devices that could reshape planets, harness the energy of entire stars, and even manipulate the fabric of space-time itself. "Look at these energy readings," Yun-Suk said, pointing to another display. They weren't just using these technologies. They had mastered them. The power output of a single one of their facilities would dwarf our entire civilization's energy consumption. Professor Park watched his team work, his scientific mind racing to process the implications of their discovery. This wasn't just going to rewrite human history. It would fundamentally change how the galaxy viewed humanity. The question wasn't just how humans had achieved such incredible advancement, but why they had abandoned it all. As the day progressed, more and more data poured forth from the ancient systems. Star charts gave way to technical specifications, cultural records, and historical documents. Each new piece of information painted a picture of a civilization so advanced that it made their own achievements seem primitive by comparison. "Professor," Harin called out suddenly, her voice tight with emotion, "I think I found something about why they disappeared. You need to see this immediately." The team gathered around her terminal, unaware that they were about to uncover a truth that would shake the foundations of their understanding not just of human history, but of life in the galaxy itself. Nam Jai-yun's 3 pairs of eyes were sore from staring at ancient data streams for hours on end. As the team's historical analyst, she had been tasked with making sense of the vast archives they had discovered. Her small workstation in the corner of the ancient facility had become her home, surrounded by holographic displays showing endless streams of information. The rest of the team continued their work throughout the facility, but Jai-yun barely noticed them anymore. She had become completely absorbed in the story unfolding before her. Each new translation revealed technologies and achievements that defied imagination. "Jai-yun, you need to rest," Professor Park Dae-ho said, approaching her workstation. His scaled skin reflected the blue light from her displays. "You've been at this for 16 hours straight." She shook her head, her antenna twitching with excitement. "Professor, you don't understand. What I'm finding here, it's incredible. Look at this." She pulled up a new display, showing schematics for what appeared to be a transportation device. "They didn't just travel between stars," she explained, her voice trembling. "They could instantly move between galaxies. They had networks of transportation hubs spanning millions of light years." Professor Park's tail twitched as he studied the diagrams. "That's impossible. The energy requirements alone would be." "They had solved that too," Jai-yun interrupted, bringing up another display. "They could manipulate matter at its most fundamental level. They weren't just using energy. They were creating it from nothing, breaking and rewriting the laws of physics as we know them." Dr. Kim Harin joined them, her 4 eyes widening as she saw the displays. "These power readings can't be right. According to this, they could harness the energy of entire star clusters." "Not just harness," Jai-yun corrected. "They could create and destroy stars at will. They used them like we use power cells." She pulled up another document, this one showing what appeared to be a stellar engineering project. They built artificial stars to power their larger installations. Li Jinwu, who had been listening nearby, moved closer. His tentacles curled with concern as he asked the question they were all thinking. But what happened to them? How could a civilization this advanced just disappear? Jai-yun's expression grew serious. "I found references to something in the deeper archives. There's a secured section of the database that I haven't been able to access yet. Whatever happened to them, I think the answer is in there. The team spent the next several days focusing their efforts on accessing the secured archives. Dr. Choi Yun-suk worked tirelessly to bypass the ancient security systems, while Jae-yun continued translating the documents they already had access to. Each new revelation painted a picture of a civilization that hadn't just mastered space travel, they had mastered reality itself. They found records of massive engineering projects that reshaped entire solar systems, of research facilities that spanned multiple galaxies, and of achievements that seemed more like magic than science. "Look at this," Jae-yun called out one evening, her voice filled with awe. They had achieved practical immortality. They could transfer consciousness between bodies, create artificial forms that could last millennia. They weren't just living in space. They had become beings of pure energy when they wanted to. The team gathered around her station as she continued to translate the ancient text. They had solved every problem we thought impossible. Disease, aging, scarcity. None of these existed for them. They could create matter from energy, terraform planets in days, even manipulate time itself. But something made them give it all up, Professor Park mused, his scaled brow furrowed in thought. Something powerful enough to make them abandon technologies that made them practically gods. Just then, Yun-suk's voice echoed through the chamber. "I'd done it. I've broken through the security protocols." The secured archives began opening, flooding their displays with new information. Jae-yun's hands flew across her interface, trying to process the flood of new data. Suddenly, she froze, her antennae going rigid with shock. "By the stars," she whispered. "I found it. I know why they disappeared." The team gathered closer as she began translating the newly accessed files. The truth they were about to discover would change not just their understanding of human history, but their view of the entire universe and their place in it. According to these records, Jae-yun said, her voice barely above a whisper, they didn't just disappear. They made a choice that would affect the fate of not just their civilization, but all civilizations to come. As she continued translating, the team stood in stunned silence, realizing that they had stumbled upon not just a historical discovery, but a warning, one that had waited 50,000 years to be found. Kang Min-ho's hands trembled as he stared at the holographic display before him. As the team's assistant researcher, he had been tasked with sorting through personal logs and journals from the facility's original occupants. What he found in one particular log made his crystalline skin pale to near transparency. "Professor Park," he called out, his voice echoing through the ancient chamber. "Professor, you need to see this immediately." Professor Park Dae-ho hurried over, his scaled tail sweeping anxiously behind him. The rest of the team followed, gathering around Min-ho's workstation. The holographic display showed what appeared to be a personal recording, its timestamp dating back to the facility's last active days. "I've managed to translate it," Min-ho said, his voice quavering. "It's a personal log from someone named Admiral Sarah Chen, one of the facility's final commanders. What she describes, it's unbelievable." He activated the playback, and a holographic figure appeared before them, a human woman in an elaborate uniform, her face bearing the weight of an impossible decision. The translation overlay converted her words into their modern language. "The Council's decision is final." The recording began. "Project Sunset will commence at 600 tomorrow. All facilities across the galaxy will initiate shutdown protocols simultaneously. The Great Sleep will begin, and with it, the deliberate regression of our entire civilization." Dr. Kim Harin's 4 eyes blinked rapidly in confusion. "They chose this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "They willingly gave up all of this advancement?" Min-ho nodded, bringing up more logs. According to these records, it was a unanimous decision by their leadership. They didn't just abandon their technology. They actively worked to erase it, to reduce their entire civilization back to a pre-industrial state. Professor Park's scales rippled with disbelief. "But why? What could possibly drive a species to take such drastic action? The team spent hours poring over the logs, piecing together fragments of information. Each new discovery painted a darker picture of the truth they were uncovering. Dr. Choi Yun-suk worked frantically to decrypt more secured files, while Nam Jae-yun translated them as fast as they appeared. "Look at this," Jae-yun called out, pointing to a new document. They had some kind of emergency protocol in place, something called the Preservation Initiative. It wasn't just about erasing their technology. They were preserving it, hiding it away in facilities like this one. Lee Jinwoo, his tentacles curling with anxiety, studied the data. These facilities were spread across the galaxy, all of them hidden, all of them waiting. But waiting for what? The answer lay deeper within the facility. Security scans had revealed another level below them, protected by security measures far more advanced than anything they'd encountered so far. Whatever drove humanity to make this decision, the full truth was sealed away down there. "We need to access that lower level," Professor Park declared. "Yun-suk, focus all your efforts on bypassing those security protocols. The rest of you, keep working on these logs. There must be more clues about what we're dealing with." As the team worked, more disturbing details emerged. The logs spoke of a massive undertaking, not just the shutdown of technology, but the systematic alteration of human biology itself. They had deliberately modified their own species, suppressing advanced capabilities and knowledge. It wasn't just technology they were hiding from, Minho said, reading through another log. They were hiding themselves, making themselves appear primitive, harmless. Dr. Song Mi-rae, who had been quietly analyzing the data, suddenly spoke up. "Professor, look at these biological modification records. The humans we know today, they're not less evolved than their ancestors. They're carefully designed to appear that way." The implications were staggering. Modern humans weren't the result of natural evolution, but of deliberate engineering by their own ancestors. They had been created to appear as a young, developing species, while their true potential lay dormant in their genes. But what were they hiding from? Herin asked, voicing the question they were all thinking. What could be so terrible that an entire civilization would choose to forget itself? Just then, Yun-suk's voice cut through the chamber. "Professor, the security protocols on the lower level, they're starting to respond. Something's happening." The entire facility seemed to pulse with energy. Displays that had been dormant for millennia suddenly flickered to life. Deep below them, ancient machinery began to hum, awakening from its long sleep. It wasn't just a hiding place, Professor Park realized, his eyes widening. This facility, all of these hidden installations, they're waiting for something. Some kind of signal. As if in response to his words, new data began flooding their screens. The truth they had been seeking was finally ready to reveal itself, and with it, the real reason why humanity had chosen to forget its own greatness. The team gathered around the main display, their hearts racing as ancient security measures began to fall away. Whatever they were about to discover in the depths of this facility would change their understanding not just of human history, but of the very nature of existence itself. The sealed chamber opened with a soft hiss, releasing air that had been trapped for 50,000 years. Dr. Ba Sujai led the team inside, her specialized sensors probing the darkness ahead. As the facility's quantum mechanics expert, she understood better than most what they might find, but nothing had prepared her for this. The chamber was smaller than they expected, circular in design with a single platform in its center. Unlike the rest of the facility, this room felt different, almost alive. The walls pulsed with a faint purple light that seemed to move in patterns too complex to follow. "This isn't normal quantum technology," Suji said, her third eye twitching nervously as she took readings. "These energy patterns, they're operating on principles we don't even have theories for yet." Professor Park Daeho moved carefully around the room's perimeter, his scaled skin reflecting the strange light. "Can you activate it, Suji?" She approached the central platform, her instruments displaying readings that made no sense. As she reached out to touch the control surface, the entire room suddenly came alive. A holographic image materialized above the platform. A human man wearing what appeared to be a military uniform. "This is High Commander Marcus Chen, recording this final message for those who find it," the figure began. "If you're seeing this, it means humanity's greatest gambit has entered its final phase." The team watched in stunned silence as the commander's image continued speaking. He told a story that seemed impossible, a tale of horror from beyond the edges of known space. The humans hadn't just explored the galaxy. They had discovered something terrible lurking in the void between universes. "We called them the Void Hunters," the recording continued. "They're drawn to advanced civilizations like moths to flame. The more advanced a species becomes, the more brightly they shine across dimensional barriers. And when they shine too brightly..." Suji's hands trembled as she processed the data streaming from the recording. "Look at these readings," she whispered. "They're showing civilizations that existed millions of years before humanity. Species that reached incredible heights of advancement, and then vanished completely." The commander's image flickered as he described what they had found. The remains of countless civilizations scattered across the galaxy. Each had followed the same pattern. Technological advancement, expansion, sudden disappearance. It wasn't natural evolution or warfare that had destroyed them. It was something far worse. "We weren't the first to discover this truth," the commander explained, "but we were the first to find a solution. The only way to survive was to hide. Not just our technology, but our very potential. We had to make ourselves invisible to these entities." Dr. Kim He-rin moved closer to the display, her 4 eyes wide with understanding. "That's why they regressed their civilization," she said. "They didn't just hide their technology. They hid their entire species in plain sight." The recording showed plans of breathtaking complexity. The humans hadn't just abandoned their advancement. They had engineered their own devolution. They modified their genes, buried their technology, and scattered their knowledge across thousands of hidden facilities like this one. "We became our own sleeper agents," the commander continued, "each generation carrying the potential within them, waiting for the right moment to reawaken. We hid our true nature behind a mask of primitive development." Li Jinwu's tentacles curled thoughtfully. "But why leave these facilities? Why risk leaving any trace at all?" Suji found that answer in the facility's quantum data cores. "Because they were preparing for war," she explained. "Not just hiding, but planning. Each facility contains a piece of their knowledge, their technology. When the time comes, when the threat returns, modern humans will remember who they truly are." Professor Park finished, his tail twitching with nervous energy. The recording showed more. Plans for weapons that could fight across dimensional barriers, shields that could hide entire galaxies, and technologies that defied comprehension. The humans hadn't just hidden from the Void Hunters. They had spent 50,000 years preparing to face them. "The signs are already appearing," the commander's image said, its voice growing urgent. "The cycle is beginning again. Other civilizations are advancing, shining brightly enough to attract attention. When the hunters return, humanity must be ready." As the recording ended, the facility's systems began a new sequence. Displays lit up showing similar facilities activating across the galaxy. The time of hiding was coming to an end. "They didn't just preserve their knowledge," Suji said, studying the new data. "They preserved their warrior spirit, their determination. Every human alive today carries this legacy in their genes, waiting to be awakened." The team stood in silence, processing the magnitude of what they had discovered. They weren't just witnessing history. They were watching the beginning of humanity's reemergence, the start of a war 50,000 years in the making. Professor Park looked at his team, knowing their discovery would change everything. "We need to contact the human authorities immediately," he said. "They need to know what's coming." The ancient chamber hummed with energy, its purple light growing stronger. Whatever was coming, humanity had spent millennia preparing for it. The question now was whether they would remember their true nature in time. Professor Park Daeho stood at the facility's entrance, his scaled skin reflecting the morning sunlight as he waited for the human delegation to arrive. The decision to contact Earth's authorities had not been an easy one, but after their discoveries in the lower chamber, they had no choice. The team had spent days preparing their preliminary reports, carefully documenting everything they had found. Dr. Ba Sujai had worked tirelessly to compile the quantum data, while Nam Jae-yun organized their translations of the ancient logs. They all knew this meeting would change the course of galactic history. A sleek spacecraft descended from the clouds, bearing Earth government markings. As it landed, Professor Park felt his heart racing. Behind him, the rest of his team gathered, their various alien features showing signs of nervous anticipation. The ship's door opened with a soft hiss, and out stepped Dr. Yu Jae-young, Earth's leading expert in xenorchaeology. She was accompanied by several other human officials, but what struck Professor Park immediately was their expressions. There was no shock, no disbelief. Instead, their faces showed something closer to recognition. "Welcome to the facility," Professor Park said formally, his translator converting his words to standard Earth English. "We appreciate your prompt response to our message." Dr. Yu stepped forward, her eyes already fixed on the ancient entrance behind them. "We've been waiting for this," she said quietly. "For generations, we've been waiting, though we didn't know what for." The human delegation followed the team inside, where they had prepared a comprehensive presentation of their findings. As they walked through the facility's corridors, Dr. Yu touched the walls with an almost reverent familiarity. "The dormancy period is ending," she explained as they walked. "We've been feeling it for generations, an awakening in our species that we couldn't explain. Sudden advances in technology, inexplicable leaps in understanding. Children being born with abilities we couldn't account for." Dr. Kim Ha-rin's 4 eyes blinked in surprise. "You've been experiencing genetic activation already?" Dr. Yu nodded. "In the past century alone, human advancement has accelerated beyond any reasonable projection. We thought it was natural evolution, but now," she gestured to the ancient technology surrounding them, "now we know it was memory." They reached the main chamber where they had set up their research station. Sujai activated the holographic displays, showing the data they had recovered about humanity's ancient past. The human officials watched with expressions of deep understanding, as if pieces of a puzzle were finally falling into place. "The dreams," one of the human officials said suddenly. "The recurring dreams of stars and distant worlds. They weren't just dreams, were they?" Professor Park shook his head. "According to the records we found, your ancestors encoded much of their knowledge into your genetic memory. As the dormancy period ends, these memories are beginning to surface." Dr. Yu moved to one of the displays showing the biological modifications their ancestors had made. "Look at these genetic sequences," she said to her colleagues. "They match exactly with the unexplained changes we've been tracking in the human genome over the past few decades." The team led them deeper into the facility, finally reaching the sealed chamber where they had discovered the truth about the Void Hunters. As they played the ancient recording, the humans showed no fear, only grim determination. "We need to wake the other facilities," Dr. Yu said after the recording ended. "How many have you located?" Li Jinwu brought up a galactic map showing hundreds of points of light. "These are just the ones we've confirmed. There could be thousands more." The human delegation spent hours reviewing the data, asking precise, technical questions that showed a deep understanding of concepts they shouldn't have known about. It was as if the knowledge had been there all along, just waiting to be accessed. "We'll need to prepare the public," one of the human officials said. "The awakening can't be rushed, but it can't be stopped either." Professor Park watched as the humans worked with his team, seamlessly interfacing with technology that should have been completely alien to them. Their genetic memory was already activating, bringing forth knowledge and skills their ancestors had hidden within them. "There's something else you should see," Sujai said, bringing up new data on the quantum displays. "The facility's deep space sensors are active. They're detecting something at the edges of known space. The room fell silent as they studied the readings. Dr. Yu's face grew serious. They're coming back, aren't they? The Void Hunters. They found another civilization bright enough to attract their attention. Professor Park nodded grimly. According to these readings, yes. The question is, will humanity remember who they are in time? Dr. Yu looked around the ancient chamber, her eyes reflecting the purple light of the quantum systems. We'll remember, she said with quiet certainty. We've carried this knowledge within us for 50,000 years. Now it's time to wake up. The team watched as the human delegation began organizing their response to this discovery. They weren't acting like representatives of a young, developing species. They were moving with the authority and purpose of their ancient ancestors. The awakening had begun, and with it, the next chapter in humanity's incredible story was about to unfold. The final days at the ancient facility felt like a dream to Professor Park Daeho and his team. News had begun spreading across the galaxy. Reports of strange phenomena centered around human populations. Children were being born with remarkable abilities. Adults were experiencing sudden breakthroughs in scientific understanding, and long-dormant human facilities were awakening on planets throughout known space. Dr. Kim Ha-rin spent hours monitoring the facility's long-range sensors, watching as more hidden installations activated. Each one pulsed with the same purple energy they had discovered in their own facility's quantum core. The network of ancient human technology was slowly coming back to life. Look at these readings, she called out one morning, her 4 eyes wide with amazement. A human colony in the Centauri system just activated something in their planet's core. The energy signature matches our facility's quantum systems. The team gathered around her display, watching as more signals appeared across the galaxy. Dr. Baz Suji worked frantically to process the quantum data streaming in from these awakening sites. They didn't just hide their technology, Suji explained, her instruments struggling to keep up with the incoming data. They seeded it throughout the galaxy, waiting for this moment. Each facility contains different pieces of their knowledge, their capabilities. Reports from Earth grew more extraordinary by the day. Human children were solving complex mathematical equations before learning to walk. Universities reported students making technological breakthroughs that seemed impossible. The dormant potential hidden in human DNA was finally expressing itself. Li Jinwu monitored the galactic news feeds, his tentacles moving rapidly across multiple displays. The other species are starting to notice, he said. Some are frightened, others fascinated. The Galactic Council has called an emergency session. Professor Park spent long hours writing his final report, trying to capture the magnitude of what they had witnessed. The truth about humanity's past needed to be preserved, needed to be understood by future generations. They never really fell, he wrote, his scaled fingers moving carefully across the keyboard. They were simply waiting, preparing for the day when they would be needed again. And now, as the ancient threat looms once more, humanity awakens not as the primitive species we thought they were, but as the guardians they have always been. Dr. Yu Jae-young visited the facility regularly, bringing updates from Earth's rapidly transforming society. The human population was adapting to their awakening abilities with remarkable speed, as if they had always known this power lay dormant within them. The genetic memories are becoming clearer, she explained during one visit. People are remembering things they never learned. Advanced mathematics, quantum physics, technologies that haven't been invented yet. It's like opening a door that was always there, just waiting to be discovered. The facility's deep space sensors continued to detect disturbing activity at the edges of known space. The Void Hunters were moving again, drawn by the light of advancing civilizations. But this time, humanity would be ready for them. Nam Jae-yun discovered more records describing humanity's ancient plan. They didn't just prepare for war, she explained to the team. They prepared for victory. Each generation that passed added to their strength, their understanding. The dormancy period wasn't just about hiding, it was about growing stronger. The galactic community watched in awe as humanity transformed. Ancient human installations revealed themselves on thousands of worlds, each containing different pieces of their forgotten legacy. Technologies thought impossible became commonplace as human scientists remembered knowledge their ancestors had hidden within their genes. The cycle doesn't have to repeat, Dr. Yu said during their final meeting at the facility. Our ancestors didn't just give us their knowledge. They gave us a chance to do what they couldn't. To face the Void Hunters not just as defenders, but as guardians of all life in the galaxy. Professor Park stood in the facility's entrance one last time, looking out at the setting sun. His team had done more than make a historical discovery. They had witnessed the rebirth of a species that had sacrificed everything to protect not just themselves, but all life in the galaxy. This isn't the end of the story, he wrote in his final report. It's the beginning of something new. Humanity isn't just remembering who they were. They're becoming something more, something that combines the wisdom of their past with the potential of their future. The facility would remain active, one of many beacons now shining across the galaxy, but its purpose had been served. It had helped humanity remember who they truly were, awakening not just their ancient knowledge, but their destiny as guardians of life itself. As Professor Park and his team prepared to leave, the facility's quantum core pulsed one last time, as if saying goodbye. They had come seeking answers about humanity's past, but they had found something far more important: hope for the future. Hope that this time, with the combined strength of past and present, the cycle of destruction might finally be broken. The story of humanity's great sleep was ending, but their true story, the story of their awakening, was just beginning.